Today we're going to talk about the new rules relating to the Secure Act and a strategy that you can employ called the IRA Stretch Alternative. So without further ado, let's proceed. Okay, here we go. For those of you who know us, INSMAX Insurance Brokerage is a full-service agency. We're in our 19th year of continued service to the brokerage community for life, annuity, long-term care, and disability. But like every other MGA out there, we've got products, we have compensation, but we like to say that we can deliver ideas, and those ideas hopefully can be translated into money in your pocket and solutions for your clients. All we ask is you pick the phone up and ask us a question, see how we can help. And today's presentation, along with many of the things that we do, are done jointly at times with input from our friends. Today, we've got some content that was provided to us by Global Atlantic for a few slides here. And we have a piece from North American that we'd be happy to send out to everybody that Ed Slott had created. So we do this all together. It's not just INSMAX, it's you, it's your clients, it's our carrier partners, and we appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today. So our agenda is pretty short and sweet. We're going to talk about not death and taxes, but the present situation relating to debt and taxes, and how that debt and the looming rising tax environment we're going to find ourselves in has an incredible impact on your clients' assets, including their IRAs. And the Secure Act certainly has had an impact on the future of IRA legacy planning. So we've got an alternative to the traditional stretch IRA, and we're going to introduce that in the context of both income and estate tax planning. And speaking of estate taxes, hey, it's looming. If you hadn't heard, well, first things first, the current taxes that we are under today, that was put in place a few years ago under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, is set to expire in 2025. And we're going to go back to pre-2018 levels. So if your clients haven't done any estate tax planning, they certainly need to look at it. And depending on how the election shakes out, we have no idea where taxes are going, but most trend to believe they're going up. So I saw this 2 weeks ago. I pointed it out in the webinar 2 weeks ago that we had some technical difficulties with, but there is trouble on the horizon. Right smack in my face was a Wall Street Journal article that said the United States debt is set to exceed the size of the economy next year, the first time since World War II. That means, you know, federal debt held by the public is projected to reach or exceed 100% of the U.S. gross domestic product. This is big. We're getting a lot of debt, guys, and ultimately that debt comes due. It has to be paid. The concern is who's going to pay it and how we're going to pay it, and setting your clients up for success in the future to pay as little in taxes as they possibly can to preserve the wealth that they've built in this generation. So I mentioned earlier, the present law is scheduled to expire in 5 years. That's good. We have a little bit of a little bit of time here before this rule expires, but it could expire earlier, again, depending on how the winds of the election tilt, and changes can happen with an act of Congress and a signature of the president. But some good news is, if nothing happens there, we have 5 years to plan. Second, we are back to pre-correction levels that were brought on by the coronavirus. So your clients that might have considered leaving money behind for their family and done some planning, and then, you know, with incredible losses in their portfolios, took a pause. Now that money's back where it was, perhaps we can set some of that money aside to do some excellent planning for, again, next generation. And we encourage you to start the conversation today. I alluded earlier to a white paper that Ed Slott had written for North American. We're going to send it after the presentation. It's customer approved, so feel free to share with your clients, and we'll take it from there. So the Secure Act certainly has made changes to inherited IRAs. And some of you on the call are aware of these changes, but for others, let's just cover them briefly. The big thing is no longer will a client be able to stretch, so to speak, the income tax due on an inherited IRA over the lifetime of the beneficiary. That's changed. We're now down to basically a 10-year stretch. After that, under the new rules, you're going to have to pay the taxes. So if we look at our three options below here, the beneficiary could immediately pay the income tax in the year that the IRA is inherited. So the Benny could take the money, pay the tax, and then do with it what they please. The second option is to pay the tax in the 10th year, allowing the heir to defer receipt of the money, letting the money grow tax deferred, and then paying the taxes in year 10 when it's physically received. And then finally, we could distribute the IRA in equal or unequal amounts over a 10-year period, ostensibly stretching for 10 years the distribution. There are some exceptions to this rule, including obvious beneficiaries who are surviving spouses, disabled individuals, minors, and those who are not more than 10 years younger than the account owner. You don't have to follow the 10-year rule. But it's important to know that because income taxes must be paid, on the full amount of the inheritance no later than year 10, a lump sum distribution like that could push the beneficiary into a much, much higher tax bracket. So let's maximize the legacy we're talking about here using life insurance. Now, this is a technique that we've been using for decades. We called it IRA Max, Legacy Max, but at no time, I think, is it more important. When I reference back to the debt that's climbing and the bill that's due, the IRS has got to come get the funds. So the first step in getting those funds, guys, was the elimination of the stretch. So let's sort of beat them at their own game. So we have an example here for Mr. John and his wife about how to use life insurance to reposition IRA assets. So the issue that we have, again, I keep harping on it, taxes, taxes, taxes. In fact, this has been a reoccurring theme for our firm to sort of discuss the tax advantages that life insurance can offer your clients and the tax time bomb that potentially is sitting inside their estates. But if certain clients have designated, in this case, an IRA or even a qualified retirement plan asset as a legacy item, that means they don't need it to maintain their retirement. For their kids, their grandkids, or even a charity, let's target those assets and do something good with them. If nothing's done, the heirs are going to have to pay income taxes on these assets, and depending on where estate taxes go, you could erode even further the value of the funds. And finally, now that we get an extra 2 years on RMDs from 70.5 to 72, it sort of means that you're going to have a larger pot of money potentially with larger required distributions to pass on to the next generation, again, ushering in a larger tax bill. So the solution that we have here repositions a portion of the IRA, and we can even suggest 100% of the IRA into permanent cash value life insurance. It's just an asset allocation design. And by doing so, we can minimize negative tax impact on the amount that's received by the heirs. And what's also interesting is some clients like to have control. Well, life insurance that can be owned by a trust has provisions and language in it whereby the client can control how the funds are distributed to those beneficiaries over their lifetime. That's pretty good. So you suggest to your client that they can maintain control even after their passing, and that has some appeal. So the benefits of this design are de-risking the legacy. Life insurance offers the ability to lock in a legacy value that you would otherwise not necessarily know what the value is going to be if you just left it in the IRA, because the markets go up and the markets go down. There's a cool new term here called legacy floor. I'll sort of highlight it here with my mouse, legacy floor. I like that idea, where you can suggest to your clients, listen, let's do some planning. You tell us how much you'd like to make sure your kids get at a bare minimum. We can guarantee that. And then we can show you some ideas where we can enhance that and still give the clients the cash flow they want, or even give them the complete control that they're looking to maintain. So let's de-risk the legacy from market fluctuation by locking in a floor value to pass on to the next generation. 2, tax advantages. Life insurance proceeds are generally tax-free. And unlike an IRA, as you know, you're going to have to pay taxes there, at least income taxes. And depending on the IRA, you're going to have to potentially be subject to estate taxes. And with a properly drafted life insurance trust, we can escape estate taxes. But also flexibility. By using certain riders on certain insurance policies, we can offer living benefits on these life insurance policies to your clients. So there's a term out there, you don't have to die to use your benefit. In this case, these riders permit access to the death benefit during lifetime for things like, long-term care, terminal illness, and with some carriers, critical illnesses. So we've got flexibility, tax advantage leverage, and we get rid of risk. Sounds like a good idea to me. So we have an example here, folks. We've got a 65-year-old, and this 65-year-old has got a $1.5 million legacy IRA. They've determined that this is going to be passed on to the kids. And in our example, we're going to distribute today at 65, $83,000 for 10 years, assuming a 28% tax bracket. We're going to be left with $60,000 that can be used towards a 10-pay life insurance policy with a death benefit of $2,020,898 immediately, day one. So we're not taking the entirety of the IRA. We're just bleeding off $83,000. This can be factored into the RMD that the client would have to begin at age 72. But let's look at some of the results of this simple, partial IRA asset repositioning strategy. Day one, today, if the client died with $1.5 million in his IRA, and it was to pass to the kids directly, immediately, there would be taxes due for income. And this particular client, we are suggesting, has a current estate value of $10 million, so we're not factoring in any estate taxes yet. So the heirs would receive, under the current strategy, $1.1 million. But because we acquired a $2,020,000 additional tax-free death benefit, the improvement to the distribution to the heirs is $1,957 day one. But what about later? So let's look at age 90, which is approximately the life expectancy of our man here, 25 years forward. So during the 25 years, the client would have had to have required distributions of over $2 million from the IRA. The IRA is worth still $2.2 million. The after-tax distributions here of $1.7 million have been received. But because of the taxes due and the calculation of projected estate taxes going back to pre-2018 levels, the net to the family on the IRA is only $863,000, where the net to the family here, which would also include distributions that came out to the family during lifetime, would be $1.7 million greater. Now, these charts don't show you a lot of the calculations that were done, but we have the ability to do that tabularly, side by side, showing you and your client what the current strategy would yield assuming that the client's taking his distribution from the IRA and they're reinvesting the after-tax amounts in a side fund at 5%. And the same goes over here with the proposed strategy. The difference here, folks, is that we have a $2,020,898 death benefit that goes all the way through. And yes, there are taxes due on both sides of the ledger, but because we are reducing the amount of the qualified balance in the IRA by $83,000 a year for 10 years, at the very end, the IRA value using life insurance is smaller, in fact, about $600,000 less. But the net amount received by the family is $1,711,000 greater because we implemented the strategy of repositioning a portion of the IRA into a life insurance contract that can set at least a legacy floor of $2 million, regardless of the performance of the market. When you compare the benefits here, all along the horizon, even all the way out to age 90, the proposed strategy by integrating the IRA with life insurance yields a greater benefit to the family. So what do we have again? We have a larger legacy. We have tax-free receipt. And even if we position just a portion of the money to life insurance, any remaining balance of the IRA could be received by the heirs so that they have use of that money even outside of the life insurance. But let's talk about another idea that Greg Leahy and our firm came up with. And his idea was pretty simple. He said, why don't we try to liquidate this thing while we're sitting in the lowest tax brackets that we've seen in a generation? In fact, those tax brackets I hinted at earlier are set to expire in 2025 if nothing happens. So under the same example, our 65-year-old best-class male with a $1.5 million IRA, assuming a liquidation over 5 years of $300,000 and about a 1/3 tax bracket, he would have approximately $180,000 a year to contribute as a 5-pay premium, yielding $3,551,000 of tax-free death benefit at the end of that 5 years. Now, I just want to rewind, if you don't mind. Remember, we're at $3.5 million at the end of 5 years. If we stayed on the present strategy, again, the heirs would get significantly less. Even using the strategy with the life insurance at day one, instead of having $3.1 million and still having the IRA, we'd have $3.5 million. And taking it all the way out to age 25, we'd have approximately $1 million more. So, I guess the whole conversation that we're having here today is, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about your client's situation, and we can talk about options, including, guys, instead of using a single life benefit here, how about using a second-to-die benefit, where that second-to-die benefit could certainly provide even more leverage? Give us a call. We're happy to share how that might look. So who should consider this strategy? For us, those clients that are over age 59 and a half, that they have a minimum net worth of more than $1 million that's separate from the primary resident, and they've got significant assets necessary to meet their retirement needs. Again, you have to identify a qualified retirement account or an IRA that they don't intend to use during their retirement. Potentially, the clients have determined that they want to address the cost of long-term care, and maybe life insurance can handle that. You have to have a desire to designate your IRA assets to your kids, grandkids, as a legacy asset, even to a charity. And finally, with all of the ups and downs in the markets that clients have seen during their lifetimes, perhaps we can minimize the risk of this market downturn at the wrong time, and also minimize the depletion of IRA assets relating to, a long-term chronic event. So we're going to open it up to comments and questions. We will be sending you Ed Slott's white paper at the conclusion, everybody who's on the call. But Greg, if you don't mind, I'd like to open up the lines here. And again, just remind everybody, 2 weeks from now, 1 o'clock, the bond alternative max idea, and to give us a call whenever. So if, Greg, you don't mind unmuting the lines, if there are any questions, we'd love to take them now. Anybody? Forgive me, but this is always a fun moment in every call. So since we don't happen to have anyone who has any immediate questions, we do want to thank you for your time. We try to run these between 20 and 30 minutes, and today we're at 22 minutes. I'm grateful for your attendance today. We're grateful for your business. Give us a call. We're here to help. And we'll see you again on October 1st at 1 p.m. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Larry. Good material.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Thank you.